My name's Kevin, and this is the Bible Artist Podcast. I believe the arts can give us fresh insight into the significance of the Bible and the beauty of the gospel. I also believe the Bible can provide the arts with complex characters and stories with profound vision into the human condition. I've been a fan of Bible art for most of my life, and so over the past few years, I've been exploring popular biblical adaptations, and I've been encouraging Christian communities to discuss and engage with the arts. Shaan Sharma is my guest today. He's the actor who plays Shmuel, one of the main opponents of Jesus and a leader of the Pharisees and the Chosen. He's also a SAG-AFTRA union leader, an acting educator, a writer, former casting session director, does a lot of different things. Shaan, before we dig into your role as Shmuel, I'd love to hear a little of kind of your personal story, what got you interested in acting, what you enjoy about it, that kind of thing.
Oh, thank you. As for what got me involved in acting, it was a mentor when I was in high school who got me started doing plays, and I started with musicals when I was a sophomore in high school. And at that time, acting for me was a way to kind of escape being Sean for a while, and I got to disappear into these characters. Um, and so and with my home life at the time, it was challenging, and so it was nice to take a break from being Sean for a while. And so after high school, I stayed in the Twin Cities, which is where I'm from, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I stuck around there, and I did work as an actor and a musician there for about 10 years. And then I moved to Los Angeles in 2007, where I've been ever since. And for me, acting now is not about escape. For me, it's now about uh, experiencing a variety of human experiences, being able to almost kind of cheat death in a way where I can get a glimpse of what it's like to live in so many different circumstances, as in so many different life stories and et cetera. So I could be a doctor one second and a father another moment, and a space captain another moment, and just get to experience glimpses of so many different types of lives. So that's a little bit about how I got into it.
That's awesome. And I've noticed that in addition to acting, you also play kind of an important role in SAG-AFTRA. So for listeners who maybe haven't been following kind of all the strike and then the recent deal and all that, could you kind of give them a little update on what's been happening?
Sure. I'm a board member of SAG-AFTRA, which is the Screen Actors Guild, which merged with the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists about a decade ago. And I've also been serving on our negotiating committee that was responsible for the strike that just took place. That strike, of course, is suspended while our members are looking at the tentative agreement and voting on that tentative agreement. But I believe that when I'm not acting or auditioning or developing my own projects or working on something, that protecting my profession is my duty. And so union service to me is part of our job. And I've been serving as a volunteer member of our union and union leadership since 2015, and then joined the leadership community around 2017.
And could you kind of lay out like what were some of the issues that were involved with the recent strike?
Yeah, the main issue that most people can relate to or are aware of is just technology is advancing so rapidly. And so there's now the arrival of artificial intelligence, not just to create anything written like with tools like ChatGPT, but also we now have gotten to the point where you can create images that are indistinguishable from real human beings that are not of real people. And it's just a matter of time until we can create video that is indistinguishable from real, footage from television or film. So one of the big issues our members are concerned about, and our strike was trying to establish protections from our members being replaced by artificial intelligence in film and television. And then another issue was making sure that we got a increase to our minimum wages that would keep up with inflation, because as everybody knows, over the last 3 years, we've had a period of higher inflation. And so our members are working for the same amount of money as they were in in the last 3 years.
mm,
And so we want to make sure they're not continuing to work under those same wages for the next 3 years, because our contracts are 3 years long. And so we want to try to keep up with the cost of living and cost of inflation. So that's another thing. And then we also wanted to make sure that we could provide more funding for our pension and health plans, especially our health insurance plans, which
mm,
only cover about 13% of our members. And so a lot of people don't know, when you're watching, film and television, you would think that these are all actors that are making a lot of money. That's not the case. Most of our
mm,
members can't make a living as performers, and they don't even have health insurance. And so it's important for us to try to increase more funding to the plan so that we can cover more people.
mm,
And then we were also trying to raise the amounts that our members earn from residuals, which is when our work is reused in, whether it's on cable, whether it's on network television, whether it's on streaming platforms. And then also we wanted to have some protections for taping ourselves in our homes for our auditions, which, was something that a lot of the country was doing in smaller markets, but in New York and Los Angeles, the culture before the pandemic was still to do auditions in person. And when the pandemic struck, obviously that wasn't possible. So it all moved to taping ourselves in our homes, which added a whole nother layer of stress and costs
mm,
and challenges for so many of our members. And so we wanted to get some guardrails around abusive practices in
mm.
the self taping of our own auditions. So those are a few of the main issues that we were trying to address.
Okay, great. And yeah, as far as the agreement, how do you feel that's done kind of in achieving some of those concerns?
Yeah, I have spent the last year of my life as a volunteer member of the negotiating committee. Both we yeah, the about a year ago is when we started having member meetings where they could actually come and tell us what they wanted us to change in the contract, and then the negotiating committee prioritized those things and then engaged in the negotiations. And so there is a lot in this tentative agreement that our members are now looking at and voting
Mm,
on that is good. I mean, the value of it is around $1 billion over 3 years, and so that is going to be a significant amount of additional money into our union members' pockets.
mm,
Um, However, for me personally, I've been very publicly I've been very publicly out about the fact that I voted against this agreement in the national boardroom. That I am proud of some things in this contract that even I was able to achieve to try to help our members with things
mm,
like the self taping challenge and other things. But there are other things that we settled for and other things that happened that just made it impossible for me to approve of the deal
mm,
as is. And so it's really a shame to have engaged for the last year and spent so much time helping with this process, only to have to oppose the final result.
mm,
So in my view, we did not achieve the things that we set out to achieve, and we left some
mm,
major loopholes and vulnerabilities when it came to artificial intelligence that I'm personally not comfortable waiting 3 years to address, because the
mm.
rate of technology changes so quickly.
Yeah.
And especially with AI, we have no idea what the world is going to look like in 3 years from now. So for me, I feel like the right time to get the protections we needed was now.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's just so much change that's happened in the past several months. Yeah. Definitely in 3 years, it's hard to imagine where we'll be. Um, but yeah, let's kind of shift and talk about the chosen a little bit.
Sure.
So the New Testament, it describes some of Jesus's opponents. Usually, it uses kind of general terms like the Pharisees or the teachers of the law. It doesn't name very many specific individuals, but the chosen has given faces and names to many of those figures. And your
Mhm.
character, Shmuel, is probably the most prominent of those. So before we talk about Shmuel specifically, who were the Pharisees that he's kind of a representative of?
Yeah, the Pharisees were the respected kind of religious conservatives of the time who really uh, were the kind of experts on both the Torah and the oral tradition. And so the Pharisees had a lot of respect from the people for being religious leaders and being experts on the law and
Mm,
God's law. And
yeah.
so so Pharisees are in many ways akin to people today who are just very knowledgeable and very strict about following what's in the Bible.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good way to contextualize it. I'm curious, like as you prepared for the role, were there any stories about the Pharisees, either like in the Gospels or in other sources or other like Jewish writings that either like kind of influenced your understanding, or you just thought like, oh, that's a really interesting story?
No, nothing in particular, because my responsibility was to live within the world that was created by the writers for our show. And so, in my own story within the show, my character Shmuel is a student of Nicodemus and
Hmm.
someone who has risen to being a fairly respected rabbi within the Sanhedrin, or not the Sanhedrin, but in the synagogue in
Hmm.
our Capernaum, in
Yep.
our village of Capernaum, and then later joins or wants to become more of a impactful religious leader to try to protect his people from what he sees as just another false prophet. And
Mm,
so I think what was helpful for me more than just any particular story was just putting myself in the position of somebody who feels a responsibility to protect their community, and
mhm,
somebody who knows that there are people out there who are false teachers or false prophets. And so what I'm hoping that Shmuel reveals for people is that people can be wrong, but that
mm.
doesn't mean they're bad people. They had good intentions. And in this case, Shmuel just happens to have misidentified Jesus as another false
Mm.
prophet.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things that's interesting about his character to me is that, even though the show kind of frames him mostly as an antagonist, we can definitely tell that he sees himself as like the hero of his story. Like he's really trying to do what he thinks is right, what he thinks is just and faithful. I think in season 3, one of my favorite scenes was in episode 8, where Shmuel, towards the end of the episode, he confronts Jesus, and I think he quotes, I think it's like Psalm 13, where he's talking about his enemy being exalted over him. He's trying really hard to protect his community, and he kind of feels like he is like God's suffering servant, who is working hard, but he just can't catch a break. So how do you think like kind of viewing himself as this person who is trying hard to protect his community, how do you think that influences his perspective and his motivations?
Yeah, I don't really see Shmuel as thinking about himself really
Mm,
much at all. I see Shmuel as somebody who is so committed to protecting the people from a charming new
mm,
who he thinks is a con artist or false prophet. The most dangerous kind of scam artists in the world are those that you would never expect, that are the
mm,
ones that seem to be the most genuine, and so they're the ones who can swindle the most people. And so I think it's hard for Shmuel to tell the difference between someone who is and is not. And it's
mm,
such a big, event to know that the Messiah is here, that it's difficult to even accept or believe that that is
mm,
happening or that has happened. And so I think that for me, I knew in playing somebody who was antagonistic to Jesus at all, I wouldn't have to try to make Shmuel any. I wouldn't have to try to portray him in any negative light. I don't. I
mm,
wouldn't need to be villainous or anything. All I needed to do was really advocate for
mm,
his point of view, and the audience would fill in the rest to see him
mm,
as a villain or as an antagonist or whatever. Although
mm,
I think most people would look at Shmuel if it wasn't in this context, and be proud that
mm,
somebody is upholding the law and knows the
mm,
law and can quote scripture and um, is willing to put himself out there for what he believes in and to protect
mm,
people. If Jesus had not been
mhm,
the Messiah, then I think the community would have been so proud that
mm.
Shmuel worked so hard to protect them from that. And so I guess in this case he's just wrong, but
Yeah.
he's coming from a good-hearted place. And I
Mhm,
hope that when people watch the show and watch what Shmuel's journey is, that they have a little bit more grace and tolerance for people who they disagree with,
mm,
because you know it's hard to break out of a rigid belief system. It's hard
mm,
to unlearn what you've been taught and to have open eyes to see something new. Even if the
mm,
truth is right in front of you, it isn't always
mm,
easy to break out of your own point of view. And more than that, I don't know that we want people to so easily abandon
mm,
their beliefs. So it's tricky.
mm. Do you think that, yeah, it is kind of that rigidity that is kind of his downfall in the show, or that like prevents him from being able to identify who Jesus is?
I think rigidity cuts both ways. You know, you
Mm,
in some ways, if you're not rigid and you compromise your morals or your values or your beliefs, that can be at the, cost of your soul. But I
yeah.
think in other ways, if you are too rigid and you can't change, then you may end up being a prisoner of false beliefs and false teachings that could also endanger your soul.
Mm,
So you're kind of, it's kind of tough either way. And
hmm,
so it's I think that's part of why we're called to be so non-judgmental towards
mm,
our brothers and sisters, because God alone knows really what's happening,
mm,
um but it can be really hard for us, despite our best efforts, to see the truth sometimes,
mm.
so yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really insightful. Do you feel like he has any other um, yeah, any other weaknesses that can, maybe not even like moral weaknesses, but just things that kind of get in his way as he's trying to carry out his goals?
Yeah, well, sometimes what we think is a weakness in one way is actually a strength in another way.
Hmm.
So, Shmuel isn't necessarily as, you know, charming or as, popular or whatever. He's very kind of stressed out a lot of the time and anxious and just trying to solve the problem. And so Shmuel doesn't have as much fun as other characters, can have. Um, but also, I'm not sure that it's easy to strike a balance between being really serious about something and committed to it day and night. And,
Mm,
I think a lot of us struggle with like a work life balance. And so yeah, I think that Shmuel is, just like everybody else. He's got his good points and his bad points, but
yeah.
it comes, like he wouldn't be who he is if he was different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the good comes with the bad.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really appreciate what you just pointed out there. I feel like that frames him for me in a way that I can really relate to. So I'm going to enjoy continuing to watch and just kind of seeing that aspect of his character.
Yeah, like sometimes I wonder, like, man, it's so like, yesterday over Thanksgiving, I met a woman who is working for the United Nations studying migration patterns of human beings, like when they migrate from one country to another. And I was thinking, and I even said this to her, I said, I'm so glad someone is doing that, because that's
Mm,
not me. And I don't,
yeah.
I don't have the personality to want to spend my time doing that. But I'm so
Yep.
glad that there is somebody who wants to study migration of human beings
Mm,
today for the UN. I'm really
yeah.
glad there's people that want to work in sanitation and garbage
Mm,
collection, and people who want to work in medicine and deal
mm,
with surgeries, and people who want to balance checkbooks and stuff. Like, I'm
mm,
so glad we're not all the same, and
yeah.
there really is, room for everyone.
Mm, yeah, definitely. So for you as an actor, what do you think has been kind of the most compelling aspect of his character? And then what's been maybe the biggest challenge?
Well, I think the thing that I love most about being in this show as this character is it's very distinct
mm,
because if you're one of the disciples, you're all hanging out and supporting the ministry and all of that the best that you can. But like for me to play kind of a antagonistic role gives me kind of a unique presence within the show
mm,
that's distinct, even amongst the Pharisees.
yeah,
Um, and so I'm very happy to have that kind of a distinct role. I
mm,
really like playing a character that makes people challenge their
mm,
own judgment, because you may have your opinion about somebody, but then you still want them to be saved.
mm,
So we have to put that as the first kind of priority is to
mm,
help them connect with God.
mm,
Um, and um, so I really like people maybe taking a pause before they judge someone too harshly.
mm,
And so I think the challenge, but it's more of an opportunity the way that I see it, is how can I play this character in a way that doesn't make him easy to dismiss or make him lacking in dimension where people can easily
mm,
like judge him. Um, if I manage to do my job well, I think that Shmuel will be a character that people can relate to themselves
mm,
because they are all Shmuels on certain issues within their own
mm,
lives. Like there's things that we're very rigid and stubborn about that I'm sure
mm,
we could relax or open our minds a little bit more about.
mm,
And then there's probably people in our lives that we wish were more flexible
mm,
or open minded who are very stuck in a way of being. And so, in that phrase from the pilot episode where, um, you know, Nicodemus says, it was a joke, Shmuel. Um, people started saying like, "Don't be a Shmuel." Like that whole first season, there
mm.
was like this catchphrase people would share on the fan forums, etc., where they'd be like, "Don't be a Shmuel." And I think that's something we can say to just about everybody about
Mm,
something.
yeah. Mm. But then, as you pointed out, like there are you can be a Shmuel in a good way too. But yeah, and, but then you can also recognize like
Yeah,
we all have that area.
it's really frustrating sometimes when someone is stubborn or
Yeah.
rigid in their beliefs. And but that's good. In some cases that's really good because you depend our society relies on people following the rules. Otherwise it would be chaos. So we don't want society to be all change and no structure,
Yeah.
You want to have structure.
Well, I imagine as you've been doing the negotiations and stuff, you kind of want to like really be firm with certain things and really trying to advocate hard for those things. So
It's not easy. Yeah.
yeah. So kind of looking forward, season 4 is coming out in a couple months, and yeah, I'm curious. I know you probably can't give tons and tons of details, but from what you can share, what's ahead for Shmuel?
Yeah, the only thing I can say is it's quite an accomplishment for a little show like ours to have grown where it already has, and we're not even halfway done with the seasons being released. We have 7 total seasons planned, and we're about to launch season 4. And not only are we launching it, we're launching it in theaters, so people can actually go to their big movie theater local, in their area, and go see the entire show in the movie
Hmm.
theaters. And that's so cool. That's so new. That's something that the Chosen. It's one of the many things the Chosen has kind of pioneered. Is this
Yeah.
watching a show in the movie theater? Um, so in terms of like what I hope people enjoy about this next season is, we get to see a different side of Shmuel than we have in the past because.
Hmm.
At the end of the third season, he has an encounter with Jesus that changes
Hmm.
him, and
Huh.
so I hope people will really enjoy that.
Oh yeah. No, I'm really excited to kind of see how he continues to process that moment and a lot of the things that he was going through in that
Hmm.
final episode. There was that other character that he encountered too, so I'm curious to see how they interact. And
Hmm.
yeah, um, yeah. Anything else? Just as you kind of look ahead to the future of the show, kind of what gets you excited about it? Just what are you what are your feelings about kind of continuing to participate in the Chosen?
Well, the being on the show has given me the stability as a performer to be able to take care of loved ones in my life, and also to be able to volunteer more for my community. So I'm really
Mm,
grateful for that, and I'm grateful that we've got another 3-ish years left before The Chosen is complete with its 7 seasons.
mm,
And I know that this incredible community and crew and staff around The Chosen are already thinking about what projects would come next, and so I'm
mm,
excited to see what they do next. There's no guarantee that I or anybody else will be a part of those projects, but it's going to be really fun to see that I was part of the first project that kind of gave birth to this kind of world of stories. Um, and then after that, I really hope that as many people see the show as possible. The goal of the show was to reach 1 billion people, and I think it'll reach that and more. And I
mm,
do think this show is something that is a wonderful inspiration for people to crack open their Bibles again and start reading
mm,
Scripture. And if it helps them to, you know, to relate to the stories more, or if it opens their eyes about kind of what it might have been like to be alive 2,000 years ago at the time, and that gets them more excited about scripture, then great. The show has always said from the beginning that it is not in any way, shape, or form meant to replace the need to read the Bible. It's meant to be a dramatic television series that tries really hard to never contradict scripture.
mhm.
And so that way, it's just a tool in service of bringing people to Christ.
Yeah, and I try to kind of beat that drum of just reminding people if they get offended by little tweaks and changes that that's what the show is all about, is just trying to entertain people, show them things about Jesus, but also drive them to reading scripture. So really appreciate
Yeah,
you
you're
bringing
not
that
going to
up.
be able to make everybody happy, especially in a community that has so many different, denominations and,
Yeah.
and views and all that. So you try to do the best you can. And the show has an incredible community and team behind it, many of whom are believers, and then another panel of a Catholic priest, a Messianic rabbi, as well as a pastor. And so they're there to provide guidance to try to avoid,
Mm.
as much unnecessary, mistakes or issues as possible. But ultimately, you're trying to make a television show that people will enjoy, and so there is some creative license that's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Um, okay, well, Sean, before we close out, do you have any other projects or other things that you're doing that you'd like to share with us?
I think, I mean, I've always got stuff going on. I produce table reads on a regular basis where
Hmm.
we bring scripts to life that have been written by amazing writers, including
Hmm.
members of the Writers Guild. And there's a podcast called Table Read Podcast that where we take some of our favorite scripts into a studio and record them, and then my partners do all of the post production sound to bring it to life with sound effects and music and all of that, where it sounds amazing, like you're listening to a Hollywood movie or something. And
Hmm.
so, not every one of those episodes is like family appropriate, but it should be pretty well marked which ones are like more like family friendly and which ones are not. Um,
Hmm.
and then I've got a couple of movies that I shot that are out. One's called Bone Cold, which is kind of like a study about soldiers having PTSD coming back from a special operations mission. And then another one that is coming out in a week is called Cheryl, which is about people being obsessed with being perfect in the world of social media, and kind of a horror comedy situation of a woman taking it too far, trying to be the perfect woman. And I'm always kind
Hmm.
of being creative and trying to do things. But The Chosen is my main focus here for the
Hmm.
next few years, and um, and I'm really looking forward to meeting as many of our supporters as possible. Because
Hmm.
as a crowd-funded show, everybody who watches the show and contributes whatever they can to it, they help make it possible.
Hmm. Well, yeah, thank you so much. I hope that kind of through the podcast, this will help you to connect to more viewers and to more people who might be interested in the show. And yeah, just really appreciate a lot of insight that you gave into the character and yeah, just what you've been bringing to him. So thanks a lot, Shaan.
It's my pleasure.
Really,
Thanks for the invitation.
yeah. And thank you everyone who's been listening. This has been the Bible Artist podcast. Hope you have a happy Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas. Godspeed.